I'm sure many of you been through such situation where, for instance, you're on the balcony listening to the sound of the rain, you're in the shower, or you're commuting in a public transport, the background fades away and then boom, all of a sudden you get this idea. Something pops up in your head. The thing is that this idea feels just a little bit more special than the average one, but it gives you this immediate feeling like, wow, this one particularly can be developed into some sort of interesting, good story. The question here is that where does this idea actually come from? Even the science studied the brain so extensively, but still the origin of the thought is still not explained in its entirety, and what we're using is some general assumptions how things can work. In this video I also want to go through these assumptions, and they're probably not the facts in their final state, but feels like intuitively it might be actually the way it does work. Our brain has those neural networks, right, which can grow stronger or weaker when they creating a bond, communicate using some electrical signals. The science have proved that the brain does emit some sort of brain waves. Also on our cells level, there are some tiny structures which looks like antennas, and scientists say they probably receiving the information from outside. So it feels like the nature of all our body, including the brain, has kind of like a transmitter-receiver nature. And I want to stick to this general assumption because I feel like that's how the thinking process and idea generating process actually works. When we exercise focus or concentration, it feels like our brain basically generating some sort of requests, and then these requests are sent to this outside global matrix which we are living in, and the replies, the information we can receive instantly or after some time. If at any moment we get the exciting idea, what we have to do as a writer, we have to note it down immediately, because as fast as idea comes to your brain, as fast it can just fly away and fade out. First advice, develop the habit having your notepad, your note application just by your hand at all times. So after you note it down, next task as a writer to bring it from the simple notes form into the scene form. Once the scene is put on the paper, this is already a very big step in writing your screenplay, because it's sort of like this basement first stone which you just laid down. So once you have this idea, it sort of immediately generates this placeholder for your whole idea. It's still not formed yet, but it's already there. So here we're coming up to the next habit which we have to develop. We're coming to such a term like a writing session. So writing session is basically the time you're spending sitting at the table in front of your blank canvas for several consecutive hours and trying to focus on getting those ideas and putting them down on the paper. For the writing sessions, it would be a very good practice if you can schedule daily, but of course sometimes it can be tiring, sometimes we have different mood. From day to day our motivation can be different. If you keep it as regular as possible, then you will have a more significant and faster progress. How many hours you should exercise for each writing session? On my personal experience, I think like 3 hours per day is quite enough. It's kind of like that minimum where you can get more creative ideas, creative sparks. Sometimes you will be really excited and somehow this connection and flow will be really like special, I don't know, outstanding, and you can go like and maybe write up to like several pages in a row. Some days will be a little bit harder. You might get maybe half page or sometimes maybe even get nothing, but this is normal. For the creative process is normal. All you need to do is come back to this idea the next day and continue. So we have this initial block. This initial blocks generates this placeholder for your whole story, which right now you don't know the theme, you don't know your characters, you don't know much of the conflict. It just something came up to your mind which is really exciting. Maybe there was some cool sequence, there is a cool world building happened there. When we are focusing or concentrating on this idea, we're generating those requests of like, what is there next, what this story can be about. We're generating our intent just to have more of this information, and as we do it, more and more extra ideas will pop up in your mind. And based on my personal experience, these ideas will appear in quite a random order. Maybe some scenes can be adjacent, or some sequence of actions of your characters can flow one to another, but in the beginning the majority of the scenes will be scattered all around. And here I think the process to fill in this placeholder looks similar like to a Tetris game. There is like a bottom line and there are objects of different shapes falling down and you have to adjust them and just fill one line. So I think this comparison works quite well with writing a story. The more you're kind of dwelling, the more you're focusing on writing, more ideas will pop up and eventually they kind of will fill in those blank spots between the scenes, and you will start to have sequences, and then sequences altogether will start to form your acts. All your attention has to be put like into connecting your previous ideas, whatever you got, pushing them forward. Unless you are thinking like completely randomly and your ideas later is really hard to glue together. But if you're focusing intentionally and you're trying to build these cause and effect connections, eventually all these ideas will come together. Imagine you're like driving a ship in a fairway. You can go to some extent left and right, but your course and your progress will always go forward. The quality of the story will depend on your final experience, but the thing is that the more you're writing, the better you become. And that's basically the whole process. So thank you so much for today, and I see you in the next one.